Welcome to Syndicated Nightmares, where each week we take a deep dive into an episode of Freddy's Nightmares based on the Nightmare on Elm Street film series. Hosts Dave and Michelle are joined by Thommy Hutson as they discuss Season 2, Episode 1 of Freddy's Nightmares, titled Dream Come True, which aired October 2nd, 1989, written by Tom Blomquist and directed by George Kishender.
Okay, welcome, Thommy. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, I'm so glad you're having me. I can't wait to do the deep dive because I feel like there's a very big pool here to go into.
Yes.
Will you kind of tell us about yourself and your Freddy fandom?
Oh, sure. I kind of do a lot of documentaries on all of the major horror franchises. I wrote and or produced documentaries on Friday the 13th, Scream, Return of the Living Dead, and of course, my personal favorite, and I hope everyone else's, Never Sleep Again, The Elm Street Legacy, that documentary that covered the entire franchise. But I also wrote a book about the making of the original Wes Craven classic, aptly titled Never Sleep Again, The Elm Street Legacy, the making of Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street. I've been a fan of Elm Street forever. I write a lot about it in the introduction to my book. It was really at the forefront of my wanting to be a filmmaker. I thought that what Wes brought to life on the screen and what Robert did with that character and what Heather did with Nancy just really showed me something in terms of, being so incredibly terrified, but at the same time wanting to keep watching and wondering about this villain, but again, at the same time being completely afraid to open my eyes. And it had everything. It had mystery, it had horror, it had thrills, chills, a little humor. And I think one of the biggest things about A Nightmare on Elm Street for me, particularly at the beginning, was those characters felt like people you knew. I mean, the reality is, Nancy could be your babysitter. And I think at the age I saw it, that really struck me, was like, these could be the kids, the older kids down the street. So I think A Nightmare on Elm Street's been such a big part of my life and certainly a wonderfully big part of my career as a writer and producer. And I'm glad, that I can be in some way associated with that,
Yeah, I am one of the owners of the special edition copies of Never Sleep Again. I think I have like book 105 out of, was it 300 that you had signed by Robert?
No, was that 750? Oh no, out of the Robert ones, I can't remember exactly how many he signed. I thought they signed all of them. I can't remember, but you have a low number.
Yeah,
I will say that.
Yeah.
I've got the
still
book
have
on
number
myself as
one.
well.
I'm never going to part with my number one. I have had people ask for me to do so, but I never will.
Oh no, don't do it. So let's take our deep dive. Dave, if you would give us a synopsis, please.
So, a therapist who tries to help a boy suffering from repeated nightmares about Freddy Krueger winds up dreaming about the killer as well. Meanwhile, a cameraman who wants to settle the question of Freddy's existence for good gets drawn into his own news story.
This episode is the beginning of season 2. And so they changed up the intro a little bit to it. It's still the same, like, Freddy's Nightmares theme song, but they added more images of Freddy in it, and I think maybe to entice longtime viewers, like, hey, we heard you, and we're going to add more Freddy to this now.
It felt super Freddy, and again, I have seen every episode, mostly when I was younger, but I remember thinking when I watched this one, it's super Freddy forward, that more so than I remembered. But I think what struck me actually the most was at the beginning of the intro was it didn't tell you anything about the show. It's these random, almost old school Kodak looking photos of random people. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what is this show about? Like, I hadn't watched an episode from the beginning in a while. And I'm like, what am I watching here? Like, is this Unsolved Mysteries? Is this Murder in a Small Town? Oh, it's Freddy.
Yeah.
And I think I was just taken with the notion that they made it so Freddy forward, but at the same time, it still always sometimes felt like when Freddy was not on screen, even if they talked about him, it was like, oh, who's this dude Freddy they're talking about? Mm-hmm. It was just an interesting thing to me, an interesting phenomenon, the show, I think.
Yeah, for the episodes in season 1, it was either the main character didn't know anything about Freddy Krueger and kind of had to, like, learn about it, or they knew exactly who he was and they never went into his history at all. So it was like...
And I think in this episode, it's very clear, like, they know who Freddy is. Well, I guess most people know who Freddy is in this episode. Mm-hmm. And I kind of thought that was interesting. And the thing that struck me again that I had not remembered was, it's almost like 2 episodes where we're going to introduce a character for a couple minutes, but then he becomes the lead of like so and so, like the second half. And it was fun to rewatch and kind of go, oh, I don't really get this show, and I guess I didn't get it back then either. But then to also sort of enjoy the camp factor. I mean, let's be honest, it certainly has its moments. Yeah. I'll say that.
The episode starts off with a young boy, he's probably in high school, named Randy, and he's having nightmares. His mom is in the audience of kind of like a Oprah show or Donahue, to where the TV host has a psychologist on the show, kind of like how Oprah did with Dr. Phil before he had his own show. And she's in the audience, and she asks the psychologist if he would come over to her house because her son is having nightmares, and this psychologist has just written a dream book called Dream Come True, and I guess it's how to suppress nightmares or something like that.
Well, I love the talk show aspect of it because it definitely reminded me of a talk show from back then where it just looked like they wrangled people off the street to sit in metal chairs in like some studio on Hollywood Boulevard. And I just love how this woman stands up and is like, I've come here because I need your help. I mean, really? You're going to let this woman do this?
Yeah. Well, what's great about it is even though he's an actual psychologist, and when she asks him to like come over for help, he's like, that isn't something I normally do. But you're a psychologist. Aren't you supposed to help people? Like what part don't you do?
I felt bad for the guy. They like put him on the spot and like, of course you'll go over to this guy's house. Like he's this acclaimed author. He doesn't. Yeah.
Well, what I found interesting too is the actor who played the host of the talk show, Jay Thomas, was funny enough. I'm probably going to be the only person talking about Freddy's Nightmares linking it to Dolly Parton. But he played a talk show host in Dolly Parton's movie Straight Talk. And he was kind of the same way, like kind of a little like snarky and like prodding the guests to do things they most likely shouldn't really do. And I love it too. Like, yeah, you should go over to this strange person's house and our cameras are going to be there. And I'm like, okay, I guess that's how it worked back then.
Well, and then that's what happened with this one. They have the psychologist go over to Randy's house to talk to him about his nightmares, but before that, Freddy comes on and kind of gives like his little PSA about how he doesn't agree with the opinions of the psychologist and basically watch at your own risk kind of thing.
Oh, and it is watch at your own risk at many points throughout the show. And I say that with a lot of love.
Yes.
I think, something else I wanted to touch on, because you are probably the experts on this particular, show. I'd like to know exactly what part of it is Freddy's nightmare. I'm still a little confused on the concept of the show after watching this one.
Freddy's like the Rod Serling of this series, that it's sort of, the series is his world, even when he's not integral to the plot of the story. Well, I guess that's how I interpret the title.
And that's what I thought, but then I saw a promo where Freddy pops up and he's like, don't worry, it's not your nightmare this time, it's mine. And I'm like, but you're still murdering everyone. You're not really afraid. I'm like, how exactly is it your nightmare? I just found it interesting. I mean, I think that it actually made me wonder, like, that would have been a super interesting show if it truly was like these people turning the tables on Freddy. But then, I guess they do it at the Act 3 of most of the movies, so I guess we've seen that.
Yeah, that's true.
I digress. I'm digressing here. Am I diving too deep here?
No. We get to the house and Randy is sleeping and the TV comes on just out of nowhere and Freddy's hand comes up from the bed and tries to grab at Randy, so he wakes up and tries to leave the room, but his bedroom door is locked. And at the same time, Tommy, you had mentioned this about the absurdity of it. So the mom and the psychologist, they get to her house and she tells the psychologist that Randy was normal before they moved to Springwood. And then that's when Randy just falls down the staircase and lands.
Oh yeah, he takes a serious tumble. And the mother is like, honey, are you okay? No, he just fell down a flight of stairs. He should not be okay. You should be far more concerned.
Yeah, it was quite a fall down the stairs, too.
It really was. I mean, And you brought up something about, being trapped in the room, and something about this particular episode. There were a couple shots in the beginning, and then that moment with him being trapped and he couldn't get out and he's looking behind him. But then even things later, which I'm sure we'll get into, the whole episode sort of had a very Freddy's revenge undertone to it.
I thought so too, yeah.
It sort of had that look and that feel, and then in terms of what the story ultimately becomes, it sort of is that, you're gonna get blamed for things I'm doing, but really I'm the puppet master. So anyway, I just thought I'd bring that up, to make sure that everyone knew I was a little smarter than they thought I was. So.
There's a couple scenes of like Randy talking to the doctor about how like Freddy's there whenever he closes his eyes, and Randy gets really upset that the doctor doesn't believe him. And then there's a scene where the doctor's in bed and Randy comes into his room and points a gun at him, and then the doctor wakes up. So now it's like the doctor is starting to have Freddy dreams.
I'd like to go a step further. The doctor is sleeping over people. I mean,
yes. At first I thought like maybe that's his hotel room, but no, he's sleeping in the guest room in the house with Randy and his mom.
It's a little forward. I mean, you'd think that he would just kind of come over, do a house call and maybe say, okay, I'm coming back in the morning. But no, he's just going to go down the hall and go to bed.
Well, where's the cameraman sleeping? Because he's there too.
Good point. Yeah. Never thought about that. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe the cameraman doesn't sleep. He's got to be ready to get it all.
That's true.
Or you would think they would do something like in the first Nightmare where Nancy's and they, hook him up to things and monitor him, watching him sleep.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I think a house call is fine. Like, let me go see your son, let me meet him. But to be like staying over for multiple nights is just a little much. Yeah. But I don't know. It was the 80s. I mean, it was the 80s.
I don't know. There's only so much that it's the 80s can make okay.
I know. I just tell myself that all the time. It was the 80s, and I just then cry.
So Brandon wakes up, and then we have Randy. We go to his nightmare, and he's like trapped in this like circus type setting, and Freddy is throwing darts at him, but Randy keeps dodging them. The mom and Brandon come into Randy's room, and they see him kind of like sleepwalking, but he's acting out the whole act of like dodging darts and everything, and then he tries to leave the room again, but his mom wakes him up and everything's okay.
I mean, which I think normally happens when you're dodging darts in the dream world and you're dodging them in the real world. It all ends up okay.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing I always thought was, obviously Freddy is toying with these people, but he's not that effective. If he really wanted to get rid of these kids and these adults, he really could. Probably a little more efficiently, but then we'd only have like a 22-minute episode.
That's true.
As opposed to a 44-minute episode. And I think the order was for so many hour-long episodes.
But he lives off the fear. It's the whole like cat and mouse game.
It's true. And I'd be afraid of having darts thrown at me.
Yeah.
Although that kid was pretty good at dodging them.
Yeah.
I think Dave and I said at one point during season 1, this is Freddy going through like physical therapy of getting beat by all the Elm Street kids in the actual movies. So he uses Freddy's nightmares and these kids as like this physical therapy to try to like build up his strength so he can go on to the next movie.
Wow, that is a super deep dive. But I'll just say, yeah sure. Why not?
So the mom is now on the couch and she's crying because she's so frustrated with Randy and the dreams and everything. And so Brandon tells her that he's going to help Randy and asks her who Freddy is and if she knows him. And she's like, no, we just know what was in the papers. So I thought that they were going to go into like, maybe Randy found something at school or one of the kids was like, oh, you live in Freddy's house. And so that's how like Freddy got into his nightmares, but there is no explanation at all. It's just they moved to Springwood and now he's being terrorized by Freddy.
To be sort of a mini through line, you move to Springwood and you're probably not going to be better off.
That's true.
Right. But then also the mom says she read in the newspaper that, who's this child killer and he got away and then the people set him on fire. But I don't think in the Elm Street mythology, I don't think the newspaper would have said that. That wouldn't have been...
Oh, yeah.
Public knowledge.
That's true.
Yeah, they would have said that he was missing or something, because I don't think the newspapers ever published that he was burned.
No one really I don't think anyone was like, guys, I have a story to tell. I was part of the mob.
Right.
That burned this guy, killed him. But I think also the other thing is there's always this nebulous, like, what do people know versus what people don't know in Springwood? I mean, look at like Nightmare 4. They have the scene in front of the house where they're sort of explaining it, to the audience probably, but also sort of to characters who sort of don't know what's going on with Freddy. Like, how do these kids not know, but some do? And so I think it's always like it's on a need to know basis. Like, right now the audience and some of these characters need to know. So let's talk about it.
So then Brandon, the doctor, decides to put Randy in a trance, and he's going to guide him. And so he has Randy in the park, and he smells his mom's baking and comes home. So he's trying to sort of create this dream world for Randy that doesn't have Freddy in it, but it doesn't work. Freddy still shows up, and he slashes Randy across the chest, and so Randy wakes up with this huge slash in his shirt, and he's bleeding. And then the doctor says, like, it wasn't Freddy, I scratched you.
Yes.
Did I get that right?
Okay. You sure did.
What?
I mean, someone had better cut his nails, or he better stop that kind of dreaming, because that was a serious couple gashes on poor Randy.
But they like completely dropped that. The mom wasn't like, why did you cut my son? Why are you taking responsibility for this?
And it was like you should rush to the hospital and get that stitched up type gash. It wasn't like this, light cut.
Yeah.
No, it looked like it was a problem. It looked like that's going to get infected if we don't take care of this.
Yeah. It was bleeding. Like there was blood seeping from his cut, but no, Brandon decides to go upstairs to the guest room and kind of like take a moment to himself, and then that's when Gary, the cameraman, comes in and warns him, like, I think you're kind of over your head with this whole Freddy business. And then so Brandon's like, oh well, give me 30 minutes and I'm gonna like bring Randy in and we're gonna try again. So Randy comes in still wearing his bloody shirt with the slash marks across his chest. It's been like an hour, So Randy tells him, like, oh, I think I have a split personality. Maybe we should talk about that.
Yeah, I kind of liked that scene, though. He sort of like morphs into Freddy, and then Freddy says, I have a splitting headache, and Freddy starts squeezing his own head, and there's all this like skull dripping
comes out.
His face. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what struck me most about that was just like all the stuff coming off. But then if you watch, like, Robert, like licks it, and of course I'm immediately like, oh, what is that? Like, what exactly is that stuff? Because as he starts eating it, I'm just like, oh, poor Robert. Or maybe it was delicious.
Yeah, who knows?
But yeah, the doctor wakes up from this nightmare, and now it's sort of like the transition has happened. Like, Randy has been cured of his nightmares, and now Freddy is in the doctor's dreams, and Freddy's got a new target going after the doctor.
While Freddy was in the doctor's nightmare, he was talking about, like, trying to reason with the doctor, like, I want this kid, like, let me have him. Go do your psychology somewhere else. Like, this kid is mine. And Brandon was like, no, you're not having him. So Freddy did try to reason with him, and then it got personal because it was like it's a turf war, kind of Freddy versus Jason, but not as good. I don't know.
Not quite as good. Well, and then he it just goes to like the nth degree with like going back to the set of the talk show to talk about how and then cars breaking through. I mean, there's just so much going on with that guy's. It happened. It all is the giant boulder rolling down a hill, picking up speed, and then there's guns blazing in a soundstage, and it just becomes like so much so fast. I actually kind of rewatched part of that because I'm like, what's exactly happening here?
Yeah.
Chairs are flying around and guns are shooting, and studio security guards are shooting psychiatrists.
So so before all that happens, we have Brandon decides to go back to sleep because that's what you do, I guess, when you are staying at someone's house. And the mom comes in wearing this like sexy lingerie and starts kissing Brandon for helping Randy. And then Freddy comes in the room and he's like asking the mom, hey, what's going on here? And she's like, no, I can explain all this. And I thought that they were going to make it to where like the mom like sold or sacrificed Randy to Freddy for whatever reason. And so like Freddy was pissed that she was going back on their deal. Like I thought that was such a missed opportunity to have a thicker storyline, but no, he just decapitates her and that's the end of the mom.
I mean, you got to get rid of the mom somehow.
Brandon wakes up from that nightmare and Randy comes in and it's like, oh, hey, thanks for all your help. I'm not dreaming about Freddy anymore. And it's because Freddy is now haunting Brandon's dreams.
Yeah, and that's where, when I had mentioned I had skipped ahead, that it just really goes to an 11. He's racing down the road. And, I mean, there's just so much craziness going on with him because he's... And the funny thing is, like, you're not in his head quite... It's like we're watching things on the outside, not seeing quite as much as he's seeing. So, I mean, yeah, it looks really kooky. Like, it just kind of just seems like he's gone berserk.
Yeah.
So Randy gets to the studio because he wants to warn everybody about Freddy, and Randy and his mom are being re-interviewed by the TV host, and the host doesn't believe that Randy is cured, so he brings in Dr. Freddy Krueger, and Dr. Freddy Krueger says, and I quote, "You didn't cure anybody, quack breath. I let the kid go."
I mean, I think that's where things, I don't want to say they go off the rails. I mean, I don't know if they were ever on the rails. But it just sort of becomes this like cuckoo town crazy pants free for all where everything starts happening. And I always love everything becomes red and green. Like the lighting is so theatrical.
Yeah.
You know, as soon as like the Freddyism start and everything, and it's like all shadows and dark. And my favorite aspect of the show is like they love to just light Freddy's eyes as if he's Faye Dunaway in Network or Mommy Dearest or something. And it's just like you get all of this, great kind of, we're cueing you in to the fact that something Freddy is going to happen. And then, of course, after that kind of nightmare, the car crash, and which I don't know where the studio is, but apparently you can crash right into the talk show.
Yeah. Yeah, there's like no parking lot or anything. It's just like street studio. That's it. No sidewalk, no gate, nothing.
Yeah, and then this is where, he gets out and then guns are blazing and it becomes like a Western.
Yeah.
For about 30 seconds.
Yeah. Brandon's like shooting the studio lights and everything to get people's attention, and then a security guard comes in and guns him down and he's dead. So then we have Freddy rolls out on a gurney and asks if the doctor is still in the house, and then answers his own question is like, not anymore. That's
like the cue, like, okay, now our quote lead is gone in part one, which again I always find fascinating about the show is it's like two sides of the same coin. Yeah. We sort of start rolling into, oh, now it's cameraman's show.
Yeah, that's one of the fun things about the episode, though, is trying to guess, like, from the first half, who's going to be the star for the second half, because they, like, just pick a random person.
It's true. I mean, I kind of didn't even think about it, but I didn't think it would be the cameraman. For some reason, I thought it might be the mom.
Oh, yeah.
Because I just was like, oh, the kid is quote-unquote cured, but the mom was part of a nightmare. So maybe something's still going to happen with the family. But then this whole thing turns into a whole other thing.
Gary the cameraman gets his turn. We have Gary the cameraman. He's at the studio going through footage of Randy and Brandon during the shooting. And he sees Freddy like in the back while he's like going through all the footage. So I thought that was kind of weird. Like it just picks up right from the go that, oh, he and Freddy are going to be at each other's throats.
Which I always kind of wondered, like, what is the connection? Like, he's just the camera guy. Does Freddy really care? But I guess the camera guy's poking and prodding enough that he's a nuisance.
Yeah, very true.
I mean, I'm really stretching it here, people. I'm trying to help us move along to get us to the reasoning, which there might not really be one. Yeah. But I think, could work.
Yeah. You have to bridge a lot of gaps in order to, like, appreciate and have fun with these episodes.
Well, because there's no real reason for Freddy to have allowed the cameraman to see or think he saw him there, unless Freddy wanted this guy for something, which we sort of find out he sort of did, which is why I said earlier it sort of felt very Freddy's Revenge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Gary gets called to a site where a suicide or murder possibly happened, and there's a woman who is dead in a dumpster. It felt a very SVU opening sequence where there's always like a hooker dead in the dumpster somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
They should have had Mariska in this episode.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah.
I mean,
before he goes there, like he steps out of the edit bay, and then we see Freddy appear on the screen in there, and Freddy just starts doing like model poses on the screen, which I love.
Yeah.
Because there's no point to it. It's just like, let's show Freddy goofing around on these TV screens.
well, I think, it's sort of, if you really, we'll do another bridge here. It sort of could work if you really tie it together with the things he says near the end, which we can get into later about being on camera, and so I mean maybe they must have been toying with that underlying theme of being seen. And I mean, I'm really okay. I can't even say it. I can't have to stop talking about it, because the more I talk about it, the more ridiculous it sounds. I'm trying harder than they are.
Yeah. That's what happens. So it turns out Gary has to shoot all this footage on his own because Judy, the reporter, is nowhere to be found. And it turns out that he and Judy are either engaged or just dating. They refer to her as his girlfriend and fiance, so I assume they're engaged.
Yeah, I kind of was taken aback by that. I was like, what, did I miss something? I didn't really realize that he had a girlfriend. I mean, like, who is this lady? Oh, he knew her. Oh, it's her.
Yeah.
I was like, I either missed something or they were like, we just gotta say it. It's good enough to say it.
They just needed to have him have like some emotional connection to this Judy, and they're like, let's just make them engaged, because why not?
It does. It's like, it doesn't really have to make sense, but it's Springwood, so it all kind of works. We just believe it.
Yeah.
As he's shooting the Jane Doe in the dumpster, a police officer comes up to him and says, "Oh, by the way, that Jane Doe is Judy, your girlfriend. She's dead." And so he kind of has like a little minor meltdown.
As one would.
Yeah.
Right. His reaction seems pretty reasonable, and then his boss is upset with him later about, you roughed up a cameraman, but he really didn't. He just was sort of snippy with people and upset.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I mean, his boss really didn't give him the benefit of the doubt that he was being asked to film his dead girlfriend.
Right.
I do think that gives you a pass, but I don't know. It was the 80s.
Right.
Anything could happen. Gary goes back to the station to watch the footage of Judy in the dumpster, and for whatever reason he's looking for clues of Freddy in the background to prove that like Freddy was somehow involved with this, and he actually ends up seeing Freddy in the back somewhere, I think like in a back alley or something.
Yes.
Where Freddy would naturally be. I mean, when you're off duty, you just kind of hang out in the back alley, right?
Yeah, maybe it was the same back alley that he and Tina were in when he caught up with her.
Or maybe it was Taryn. I mean,
right.
Oh yeah.
Who knows what's going on in those alleys? I mean, it's really tragic. Yeah,
I like Taryn's alley better than Tina's alley. I just thought hers had like more spunk to it. It was Tina's.
It had a little more personality, but it also Tina's was scary. I think Taryn's had a little more personality. Then you got to look at it like Tina's was, in someone's backyard, and Taryn's was on a soundstage. So they had a little more ability
true.
to have to funk it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Gary tells his boss that Freddy is killing everyone, and his boss is like, I think you need to take some time off. So Gary is on leave with pay for right now.
He's been assigned to a desk.
Yeah.
Which is probably for the best, because I mean, you're not really going to send out your psychotic cameraman to cover a story. It might be better to just take that time
Yeah.
off.
Well, Gary takes matters into his own hands, and he wants to prove that Freddy is killing everyone, so he goes to Randy's house from the first half, and they decide to go to Freddy's boiler room and look for evidence that he's still alive.
Well, and I gotta tell you, that whole moment, I mean, it's like 6 minutes of them just wandering around.
Yeah, it's a long time.
I remember thinking, like, this is taking a really long time. And I'm like, I can't really fast forward it, but I would. It's like they're like, and even at one point, Randy's like, "What exactly are we doing here?" And I'm like, "Yes, what are we doing here?" but that. Okay, well, I'll get to it in a second because I think there's probably another moment before the moment I'm going to talk about.
So as they're like wandering around this boiler room for eons, they stumble upon, I think he's a homeless man. Whatever, this homeless man is dead. Randy runs to go call the police. And this is like one of these moments when they have to like run and find a payphone, is when you're brought all the way back to like, oh, right, this is the late 80s. Cell phones weren't a thing yet. So that's kind of like a nice reminder.
Yeah, and actually this does tie into with one of the things I was going to say was my whole Freddy's revenge motif. It sort of feels very, Jesse, Lisa, when they're in the boiler room and like they open up that cabinet and then, jump scare. Yeah. It's like sort of the same thing happens here. They're wandering around and then they open it up and jump scare, a body falls out. I mean, it wasn't a body in Freddy's Revenge, but there's just, I think, so many little pieces of this that actually make me think of part 2 for some weird reason.
Yeah. So Randy leaves to call the police, and then Gary stumbles upon like this blood note that Freddy left. Just this note written on the ground in blood that says, "You are here, and so am I."
Well, he also doesn't spell it right. I thought Freddy'd be a better speller.
How did he spell it?
It's like you, like the letter U and the letter R, I think. Like it's super forward thinking. Like it's almost like he was texting.
Yeah.
Right. It is. It's a U and an R. Like you are blah 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 blah. And I'm like, oh my god, he would. Yeah, you know what? It's not that he's a bad speller. He's being economical. He's like, he knows I only have so many characters for this tweet. Yeah. So I gotta make it count.
Well, I think it was written in blood, so maybe he only had, so much blood for so many letters.
That's true.
So,
I thought that too. It sort of looked like spray paint, but I guess it was
supposed to be blood.
Yeah.
So Gary picks up his camera and transmits the feed to the news station so his boss can see that he has Freddy and is going to get Freddy to admit to all the killings. His boss and everybody at the news station can only hear Gary on the video. They can't see Freddy, even though he's like, Gary's pointing the camera right at him. So it's kind of like that, like vampire can't see him in the mirror kind of thing going on.
I sort of liked the idea of what they did, but there was a tiny part of me that thought it would have been interesting for the his boss and the tech guy, whatever, watching the feed to maybe see some sort of glitches and not have this what it made me think of, like the movie Contact, where they have the footage and they're like, what it doesn't interest me that there was snow on the screen. Like, I get that. What interests me is that there was like 3 hours of it when really there shouldn't have been. And I liked that it made you think on both sides. And here it was just, okay, this guy's obviously nuts. Like to his boss, Gary's nuts.
Yeah.
But I thought it would have been neat if they gave it little tastes of like, is there something else there?
Yeah.
Are they? But they didn't. I mean, again, I'm on the high board now, diving. Like I'm really going there.
That's good. The police call the news station because they're looking for Gary, and his boss tells the police that he's at the boiler room warehouse place, and the police tell him that Gary is wanted for Judy's murder because his clothes were found at the crime scene. And I kind of thought, well, if they're dating, like, what if she was wearing his sweatshirt or something, Like, why does that mean that he's the murderer here?
Well, but when did he have time to do this? He was clearly sleeping over,
over at Randy's house. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But I also, like, what's the motive? And, like, why did Freddy even want him to kill? Again, this is very Freddy's Revenge. Like, I'm going to get you to murder people, apparently. And blame, I'm the murderer, but you're the vessel or whatever.
Yeah.
But why? Like, like we never get any kind of story as to why these particular things are happening. Like, why did he kill the girlfriend? Why did he kill a homeless guy?
Yeah.
I mean, there's no layer there. It's just like, bam, this is it. Don't think too much about it. It's just murders.
Yeah. For this, we have to take a very deep dive into a very shallow pool.
But like Nightmare 2, he's using Jesse's body to kill people, whereas this one, like Freddy's, he doesn't really need Gary. He's like killing people on his own, and then Gary's and sort of framing Gary for doing it. But it didn't really make sense to me.
Yeah, it's sort of like Freddy's Revenge worked, but this was like almost like sort of the idea. But you're right. He didn't need him. He just blamed him. But why? Who cares? Like, why frame Gary? That doesn't exonerate Freddy. No one's after Freddy. No one's saying, "Oh, Freddy's clean because Gary did it."
Right. Well, maybe Freddy's mad because Gary meddled with telling Brandon, "Hey, you're in over your head with this Freddy business," and so maybe Freddy was like, "Hey, man, stop like cock blocking me," in a sense, because he wants to go over Brandon
Freddy
and Randy.
Is probably a pretty sensitive guy to these kinds of things. This is my murder turf. Let me just do it. This is my corner. Get off my corner. But then you have Freddy does his thing, which ties in earlier about the whole being on screen. Oh, get my good side.
Yeah.
I'm a star, and I've always wanted to be in lights or whatever. I've always wanted, to have my eyes lit up like a starlet in the 40s. Well, your wishes come true, Freddy.
So Gary is filming Freddy through the warehouse or boiler room as Freddy's like taunting him, and Gary's walking backwards and kind of falls / is pushed by Freddy off this ledge, and the police show up to the warehouse and find Gary dead on the ground. That's how it ends.
Well, Freddy definitely, I think, does like a slash.
Okay.
I think but I don't think we don't, it looks like a slash, but we don't see any slashes on him. But I think that was the idea. Or you're right, maybe he went for him, but Gary instinctively, leapt back to safety. But, oh no, it's not safety. It's a fall. But there is a moment that I thought was really, really nice, that really wide shot at the end where sort of in slow-mo, like Freddy moves the two broken beams away as he raises his arms in victory. And I was like, that's a kind of a beautiful shot.
Yeah. So then Freddy comes on and talks about, it was what you were talking about, Thommy.
Yes, where he says, get my good side, and I always wanted to be a star, and I always wanted to be on TV, and that kind of thing, which plays into the episode. It plays into the fact that, wink, wink, I am on TV. You're watching me right now.
Right.
I always wanted to be on TV. Maybe they'll give me my own show.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And then, maybe, just as fast they're going to take it away, but we don't know. But yeah.
There's still 21 more episodes left. It's fine. We'll make it through.
I mean, listen, it's a fun show to watch, and of course, it's fun to be snarky about it, but it is a fun show, and it's clear that Freddy was such a phenomenon at that point in the zeitgeist and in pop culture and in the minds of audiences. Like, you can completely see why they're doing what they're doing, and like you said in the beginning, they're making it more Freddy centric. And I mean, he's in this episode a lot. It's just, there's, and the red and green motif is just pushed to the max. It's just like Freddy, Freddy, Freddy. And, it's just fun to kind of look back in this almost like time capsule of horror television, and there was a lot of stuff going on back then. And this was one of the big ones, because you had a massive, major, popular character at the forefront. You didn't have a Michael Myers TV series. You didn't really have you didn't have a Jason TV series. You had Friday the 13th, but it was Jasonless. And I think what they tried to do was really interesting, and the fact that it succeeded for 2 seasons is actually pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay, is there anything that you would like to promote or talk about that you're working on?
Well, I'd love it if people would check out my novel Jinxed, which is definitely a throwback to the slashers of the 80s and 90s. It's horror with a little thriller and mystery thrown in, definitely inspired by movies like Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Urban Legend, with, some Agatha Christie and Lois Duncan thrown in. And if you want to go into a really deep dive into the original iconic 1984 Wes Craven masterpiece A Nightmare on Elm Street, I would say check out my book on the making and legacy of that movie, Never Sleep Again.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and talking to us about Season 2, Episode 1. Were you able to make through it okay, or are you going to watch the rest of the season?
I am going to watch the rest of the season. I might even watch the show from the beginning because it does kind of take you back, and I'd love to see the progression of how things went and the progression of how they used or didn't use, Freddy and things like that. But I'm glad that I got to watch this and talk about it with you guys. And because you know why? It was a dream come true.
Aww. Well, thank you, Thommy. Thank you so much for listening. Please join us next week when we talk about Episode 2, Heartbreak Hotel, in which Freddy teaches us the importance of grammar.